Final Fantasy 15. It has been quite some time. I did a stream for this already, so we're going to kind of just get right into this. Not really a full-fledged review, because I'm not all the way through the game yet, but I am far enough to where, as far as I know, before the game gets very linear. So I've done enough of the things that don't necessarily matter as far as being able to have an opinion, or a good opinion in the game, because it does become much more linear at a certain point. And outside of that, the open world aspect, like I've done a lot of the things that need to be done in that now, so we'll go ahead and get right into this. It's been a while simply because this game was first announced in 2006 on the PS3. It's crazy thinking about it now. It was originally dubbed Final Fantasy Versus 13, which I'm sure most Final Fantasy fans already know that, as part of the Fabula Nova Chrysalis project. It was supposed to be like Dark Kingdom Hearts, basically, as far as like the combat goes, and it definitely pulls that off pretty well. 10 years later, here we are with the full product. It's been an interesting journey, to say the least. But, of course, I'll say more because I'm making this video. It's been a very interesting journey because there are a lot of things you don't traditionally do in a Final Fantasy game that you have to do in this game. Some of these things are like camping and actually driving around in a car. And one of the four bros, Prompto, likes to take pictures randomly. You can actually go to restaurants, and that's one of the more important things to do. The thing is remembering to do these things. Like, it's not something that I'm accustomed to, but you actually really want to do that because not only could you get possibly extra dishes for one of your bro characters, or get extra dishes they can prepare. That would be Ingus. He can prepare extra food. Your main character Noctis, his skill is fishing, and Gladio's skill is survival. So that basically lets you hunt or scavenge for better items after battle. But you actually want to go to all the restaurant type places. The reason being is that it kind of opens up other places on the map for you to see to begin with. You can enter hunts, which is kind of like side quests. They're exactly what they sound like. You hunt a certain monster. You do have a separate ranking for that. As you get that up and do more, you get access to higher ranking hunts. This is all, a slow progression as you learn the combat system, which is a thing in itself. It's much more active and definitely much more exciting than, say, Final Fantasy XIII's paradigm shift crap, which really turned me off to the series, actually. So, really was putting a lot of my chips on this being good, or it probably would be my Final Fantasy, which the title is funny in itself because we're 15 of them in. Many spin-offs later, many remakes, many sequels to main series games. It's shit's not ending anytime soon, so it is what it is. It's good to have a strong game here. It is definitely fun to play. Roaming around, be it car or by chocobo, or just randomly roaming around and messing around with the combat. It's a very fun game. Even if you die, you can kind of get help from your team, which is nice. It's got this... in that aspect, it's kind of got this Gears of War feel to where you can, your team actually matters, and it's all about doing things with them, and they can help you out if you're downed or whatever. But if you stay there for too long, you have this other period of time where you're basically like dead, and unless you have a Phoenix down, there's no way you're coming back, and you get a game over at that point. The characters, mostly... To be honest, the most interesting characters are basically the four brothers, or royalty brothers, or whatever you want to call them. The four main characters, the four guys you drive around with and are essentially part of your party the entire game. There are some exceptions to that, but I'm not going to get into it because spoilers. But those are basically the interesting characters. I mean, you have some interesting characters outside of that. You have Cindy, who seems to be, even if her character herself isn't interesting, and you know, clearly she's there for eye candy. There are interesting side quests and nice dialogue that comes from speaking with her. So she's definitely one of the more interesting characters, along with Sid himself, which is in many of the Final Fantasy games to date. It's kind of, it's hard to say. Like, I don't really find a lot of the other characters crazy interesting, but maybe this is just, maybe the story hasn't even started yet. I mean, that's crazy saying like 18 hours in, but the linear aspect of the game, which is like the second half, I guess, focuses much more on story and less on the open world aspect. So it's basically the reverse of what happened with 15, where you have to play like 35 hours into the game to actually start doing open world stuff, having more control of your party, and actually, I don't know, having fun with the game. So I definitely meant to say 13 here, not 15. Obviously, I wouldn't be talking about the game that I'm currently attempting to do impressions on as a bad game, as considering I just finished saying good things about this game. So yeah, we're talking about 13, Final Fantasy 13. Definitely not to be confused with Final Fantasy 15. Moving on. I think I prefer this path. It's hard to say completely because I haven't done that linear portion quite yet. Maybe I'll come back to this on my personal channel and give more of a, I guess, updated opinions at that point. But at this current time, I highly enjoy Final Fantasy 15. I've heard mixed opinions about the music. The music seems pretty great to me so far. The summons are absolutely stunning. That said, I only have access to 2 currently. I'm probably coming up on a 3rd. I'm not going to ruin what those are, although one of them was technically, you did technically see it in the trailer, so Titan. The one in particular I've summoned is not that, but again, I'm not going to ruin that because spoilers. But it looks fantastic. I actually might leave video footage, so if you don't want to see that, you may want to look past this part, because I'll probably edit said summon to this very part, because I just so happen to be talking about it. Or it won't be here at all. Just in case, you may want to ignore it at this point, I'll put it right here if I decide to include it at all. If not, you can feel free to not pay attention to what I just said in that aspect. But yeah, it's this game went through development hell as versus 13 to finally turn into what it is now. What we got, I'm excited about. You know, there's a lot of things that can be compared to, say, like GTA or other sandbox type games. But once you get over that, the fact that you can do these things actually will make it more approachable to even brand new fans. Like fans that I don't think are necessarily into the series, this would be the one to get into. It says it right in the beginning. This is a Final Fantasy for longtime fans and also newcomers. I think that's a fair statement to say. And if for no other reason, even if the story ends up being lackluster, which I've read, and you know, I don't think it's terrible, but I also don't think it's the most like gripping thing ever. So, but regardless of that, you know, the gameplay definitely drives you in for this, and just because of the sheer amount of things you can do outside of the normal grind of an RPG and visiting shops, getting your best weapon, so on and so forth. There's so many other little things you can do because it's an open world game that if you haven't played a game yet, this might be something to get you into it and perhaps then spark interest in older titles, which you obviously won't be able to do as much in, but at least get you involved in the Final Fantasy universe, because there's some things that will transfer over to each, such as chocobos. You, of course, do get chocobos in this game. You can level them up from walking far enough, and you can upgrade like your sprinting and feed them and so on and so forth. They look very, very awesome, and you know, you can like drift with chocobos. That was shown off in the chocobo trailer. Your friends ride the chocobos as well, so you're always hearing the like quez and warks and so on and so forth. Typical chocobo noises. There are certain areas where chocobos won't go, just because that's kind of their thing. There is DLC that's going to be coming to this. I may touch on that again. This would be something for a separate video. I still have to finish the core game at this point, so I mean, there is still that. Something that's it's a minor annoyance. There's 2 autosave slots that take up slot 1 and 2, unless I'm doing something seriously wrong. And slot 3 is my actual save, my manual save. Checkpoints can be a bit of a bitch, especially if you're in a particular hard dungeon. You get pretty far, and then you get to the end, or towards the end or whatever, and you end up running into an enemy that kind of stomps your face in. And if that happens, you're kind of screwed, because then you're starting right from the beginning, and you had no chance to save throughout the entire thing. In that aspect, it kind of takes you back to the older Final Fantasy. It's kind of reminiscent of the very first Final Fantasy, actually, where you can only save on the world map, which kind of is the case here as well. Everything looks visually stunning. The food looks just as fantastic as it was shown off before. It looks like real food. Anytime I see Ignis cooking in this game, it makes me hungry in real life, because that's just how good it looks. It's definitely... This is more of a Final Fantasy experience, just because of the scale of the game. It's less... I mean, it's still a game, obviously, but it's more... There's a whole experience to go with. And this experience, unfortunately, does seem like it falls short on story. Again, I can't 100% confirm that, because I haven't been... I feel like it's going to start getting really good, but... If what I've read is to be believed, that's not like the main thing for this, which would of course give it minus points when comparing it to other Final Fantasies. But if I had to say so at this point, I'd definitely put it on like a top list, maybe even a top 5. But a lot of this is kind of just speculation and really just reflecting on what I know thus far. There different types of weapons for each character. Each character can cast spells as well. You kind of have this makeshift spear grid type thing that spans across several categories that you get certain upgrades for either yourself or the rest of your party or support, and just a bunch of random things. I feel like a lot of things have kind of gone back to the sphere grid, but not been as, I guess, cool or innovative as the sphere grid was at the time. But it tries, it does what it can. That's pretty much all I got with this game thus far. A neat little feature, which is something you can compare to a game, say, like GTA, is that you can visit shops, and you have tracks that you start with. Like, you can play music in the car, and you can also buy a portable iPod or something to go ahead and play music that way as well. You can play other tracks outside of what is in the game, and a lot of these tracks are kind of like generic whatever, but you can also play tracks from the older games. You only start off with 1, 7, and 13. Don't ask me how they came up with that selection, but you can buy others. You can buy stuff from 9, you can buy stuff from the 2 different Dissidia games, you can buy stuff from like the expansion soundtrack of 9 even. Like, there's a lot of different music you can unlock that way. It gets you select tracks off of each. I guess consider it like a greatest hits of sorts, or at least as far as the people who made this game are concerned, for each part that you can play in the car, which gives you quite a bit of music to toy around with. You can get sidetracked from plotting certain routes in your car because Prompto might want to take a picture, or apparently Ignis doesn't really like driving at night, and then that basically forces you to either drive the damn car yourself because Ignis can drive in autopilot, or you drive yourself. And since he's not willing to drive at night, if you want to do anything at night, that's the only thing you can do. The night sequence is cool. There's no stupid little message that interrupts it, a la Simon's Quest for Castlevania. At night, there are stronger enemies, and some enemies that will only pop up at night, which that also applies to some hunts that you do. I'm trying to think of what else I actually might be forgetting here, but I'm kind of also doing this a different way. I didn't want to quite make, even though this is going to be the last video on this channel outside of video 400, which is already pre-planned. I always do something special. This is going to be the last video that I do of this type, but I also didn't want to quite make it a max attack because I'm not really... This game was too big in scale to do kind of like a first impression and overall impressions like right off the bat, because it's a huge game. And even so, I just haven't simply had the time to go through all of it. So I'm speaking at this point because I've played enough to at least talk about it. And that's kind of what this is going to be. This is footage I've captured at said point that a lot of places have suggested you can be at this point and don't go further, kind of like do all the stuff you want to do now before you move on to the linear portion of the game. So there's going to be random clips from that. I'm going to try to mix it up to show as much as possible. Listening to this again, I may line up certain clips with certain things said. It's been a while since I've kind of done it in this style, and this is something I actually would lean more towards probably on my personal channel if I'm going to do like reviews and such, like I did with Mighty Number 9. If you want to check that out, you can look up Kid Machinate on YouTube, because that's where things will be from this point forward. All being said, like I said, 400 is pre-planned, so keep a lookout for that. It's going to be a special tribute to both a series of games and also to a certain friend that I've had the pleasure of using. He gave me permission to use his tracks. That probably just gave the whole thing away, but regardless, we still don't really know what's going to happen, or nobody knows what I'm actually going to do, so I'll put that out there. I might put a hint at the end of this as to what I'm actually going to do, but I'd have to actually find something to be able to do that. Now, in fact, we're just going to leave it a mystery, because I've already said too much. So, 400 is coming. I want to get it done by year's end, but I'm not sure the possibility of that. I'm going to try to do it because that was my goal. But this was the biggest thing that I was going to do leading up to the end of the channel. So this is finally done, so I can get on that. And again, personal channel, pretty much no false feelings of like a schedule or whatever. Like I basically put out what I want when I want. No real pressure on myself, because that's really all it was. But it's a mental thing. But before I ramble on too much longer, this is it. I would highly suggest, as a Final Fantasy fan, definitely check out this game. Do not miss out on it. Would I consider it a Game of the Year contender? I'm not really quite sure about that answer again, because I'm not really, I'm not all the way through it. But it's definitely worth checking out. You don't want to miss it. Especially if you got a bad taste in your mouth after 13 and don't really bother with the MMOs. This is definitely going to be your re-entry point. Don't give up on it yet. I definitely was ready to, and this game needed to be what it was hyped up to be. And I think, for the most part, it does just that, and dare I say, and then some. But then some is kind of speculative at this point, because I'm not 100% done with the game. So there might be a follow-up video based on just that in itself, but for right now, I will catch you guys in another episode in another time on another channel, my personal one. Take care, everybody.